good discussion. Coming downstream from Sunday, we want to talk about a topic that I think is kind of embarrassing to get into. One of our guests is going to share some embarrassing stories, at least one. But mostly, I'm excited about the fact that I actually have the most hair out of any person that's going to be on this conversation tonight. So I'm going to let you guess right now in the chat who the two people are that are going to be joining me. So the list of people with less hair than me is short. So you're probably going to guess who it is. As we step into this, midweek happens every week here, Wednesdays, 7:00. And it's just a time for us. We want to, as a church family, we want to dig in with you. We want to pull a thread from what we talk about on Sunday, unravel it a little bit, and get into a little bit more detail about taking our faith, taking what we learn from our messages on Sunday, and actually trying to lay them on top of our lives and get into making it a part of who we are as God's people, as a church family. So with that, I'm going to bring in a couple guys that you most likely will recognize. So we got here. There it is. Did you guys guess? It's Ron and Jala. How's it going, guys?
It's good.
Good.
Doing good.
I technically have hair and I can grow it out. It's just incredibly thin now, and it's like see-through. So in the glory days, I had a very confused afro, and I thought it was great because I lacked humility in those days. So
So
I got introduced on a couple of morning coffees ago in the chat before it even started. Somebody asked, "Hey, who's on today?" And somebody in the chat said, "I'll give you one guess. He's tall, dark, and shiny." And so
yeah, but at least you got tall and dark going for you, man.
yeah, that's true.
Some of us just have chubby and shiny with hair, so that's not great.
So,
chubby is beautiful. You calm down. Okay.
Okay, so Jala, first off, man, we got to say it's great to see you. We got to see you on Sunday, but we didn't get to hear from you, and I missed you, man. How you doing after your tonsil surgery?
I'm good. Way better now than I was. It was. I'm a pretty big baby and wimp, but it was without a doubt the worst pain and experience I've had. And it was just a bummer to miss 3 weeks and not be able to be a part. And we had a lot of really bad pain. Sonic slushies, the like blue coconut one, that was my jam because it was just swollen and a mess. I think the most depressing moment was I had pulverized mashed potatoes mixed with French onion soup that was like refrigerated because that's like all I could eat, and I could barely eat that. And then I was like, you know what? I'd rather just starve. Like, I'm good. So
wait, time out. So you had like mashed up potatoes and soup that you then put in the fridge and then
it was
Dude, no.
Mashed potatoes mixed with French onion soup to have more flavor. And then my wife Maggie had to like pulverize mashed potatoes. Like even that was too intense. And then you couldn't have hot things. And so it went in the fridge and then I ate it later. That's gross. That's my son Ethan just poking in. So
for somebody that likes to talk too much, you've had the most like vocal issues in the last year or two. Is God in that, or is that
I think he's trying
your wife sabotaging something?
Yeah, I think he's trying to tell me to shut up and be slow to speak. And actually Jesse, who's on the worship team and does stuff with youth and young adults, he's messing around. I hope maybe he was serious. So he's like, maybe God doesn't want you to sing. Maybe that's what he's doing. I was like, maybe.
That's not it. That's not it.
I have to say it has elevated your emoji game quite a bit. All these times of not being able to talk, like texting emoji level is next level. You introduced me to emojis I don't even know exist.
Yeah, it's either that or it's because I'm a dad. I don't know what it falls into, what line of whatever. I've noticed that some of the younger people on the team that I talk with do not use emojis or GIFs nearly as often as I do. So I think it's revealing something of where I've landed in life. But yeah, no, I'm glad to be back. It's healed well. I'm like a week and a half out from being cleared to sing. I thought about being stubborn and singing this Sunday, but I won't. I'll behave, and it's the doctor, so it's good. But glad to be healed. God's been really generous, even in 2 summers in a row and birthdays of just being under the knife. So hopefully,
Dude, I think, Jala, that was the first time I met you.
Yeah.
Was when you were going into surgery.
Yeah.
For your throat thing last year, literally like at the outpatient place. They were like, "Hey, you want to meet Jala?" And we came and prayed with you.
True.
Which is kind of crazy.
That's true. Look at you, nice guy.
I mean, what can I say? It's a perfect segue to the topic we're going to talk about tonight. Don't you love how I dropped that in? Like, what a cool guy I am. So, Ron, your message this week, there's so much in there and so much great stuff. We're just thankful to have you and someone that's caring for us right now in this season. But one thing you and I were talking earlier today that we felt like we could really dive into, and again, like I guess pull the thread on the sweater, unravel this a little bit, is this whole idea about humility. Is that something that was kind of in the middle of what you talked about and maybe got lost in some other things? And it's a rich topic and an encouraging topic. So I guess we just wanted to jump in on that. And the first thing I think that you brought up to me that's really been helpful to think about is just even what it means to be humble. We had a great conversation before we jumped on with everybody else here about the surprising kind of way that God sees humility and some of the confusion around it. So Ron, you want to jump in on that? And
Sure. Yeah.
You there?
Yeah. I mean, it does get a little tough to kind of even identify or define what humility is. We know we need it. We know we should have it. This weekend we looked at Jesus that displayed it better than anybody. And yet it's still kind of like elusive to like what humility actually is. To do what Pastor John talked about last week, about really listening well so that we can love well, which is so crucial, especially from people maybe different than us or that we don't understand. That's so key and so crucial in these days. And that stems from humility. But I think, it's kind of hard to target, but if you get to kind of the biblical definition of humility, it really just has to do with a proper understanding of ourselves in relation to God and to some extent to each other, but it's a proper understanding. It's understanding rightly what God says about you, and not too highly of yourself and not too low of yourself. We were trying to remember the line earlier today about humility, but I think it's so good. And it's something like humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And that's it, because we can go polar opposite. You can be super arrogant and prideful. We know what that looks like and what that is, selfishness and whatnot. And there's humility that needs to come to that.
Yeah.
But then there's also the undervaluing and underviewing of yourself. You see yourself worse than what God sees in you. And humility needs to come to that too, so it's got bearing on all of us, really.
Yeah. And Jala, this is, again, I don't want to compliment you too much and ruin your humility, but talented people are not always known for being humble people. Is that fair? But you're someone I think that shows a lot of humility despite being someone that's gifted and worked hard to be a great musician and even better husband and follower of Jesus. What do you see yourself being more humble now than you used to be? And if so, what was some of the path that's led you to the place where you're growing in the humility that you have? Not saying you've arrived by any means.
Yeah, definitely not arrived. Oh, here's my son walking up to say hi. So,
Ethan.
What's up, Ethan?
Go ask mom, buddy. Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, it's real life. We're live. It's how you know it's real, everybody. But I think some of the problem for me in my journey was just kind of like, I think I didn't had a great maybe modeling of what humility looks like, and understanding that aspect of Jesus and what he models is more of like a lot of it being framed up as Jesus is a nice guy and he loves you, not actually understanding this big part of his characteristic. And for me, I've had a lot of moments where it's interesting. I've been humbled, like because of circumstances or things, or I've had people just call stuff out, or I've as time gone on realized like pain and sorrow I've caused to friends and doors that I actually closed myself because of not being humble and mindset. And there's so many stories. One of my biggest wrestling for me before we moved here was a lot of almost moments, like almost had been, and it'd be like I'd play with someone and they'd be like, oh, hey, you sound really good. I actually know so-and-so. And it'd be some big name person, like, I'm going to get you in touch and then it would seem like it's going to happen. And I'm like, oh, this is the moment. This is it. Like, I've been working so hard. I sound so good, all this stuff, whatever. And then it just wouldn't pan out. And it was time and time again, and being frustrated with God. Like, you made me passionate. You've made me into music and love it. And I think I'm pretty good at it, and all this stuff. And I'm a better Christian than this guy who's getting this thing. And what's up with that? And, why are you doing this, God? And this whole like missing out on, like, it's not how it works. And generally speaking, you don't, I think there's one end where like you can be prideful, not humble, and you can force doors open and make something happen. But there's something different for like the path that God may want you on, and you as a person. And if you lack humility and you're prideful, I believe a lot of times God can't use you in those moments, or can't use you to what he wants to yet. And so, and moments, man, where I've just really been arrogant and prideful and hurt friends like deeply, and lost friends. And now I've had moments where I interact with them, like some stuff, it's like 10, 12 years ago, and it's still messy, and I'm having to apologize. And honestly feeling sick to my stomach that I was even that way or behaved. Because as I've, journeyed down this road, wanting to be more Christ-like and really getting to know who he is, you start realizing these things that are like, oh, this just doesn't match who he is. And like, I'm disappointed that I have this and carry it. I don't want it. So it's been good. And I've had a lot of great friends and mentors call things out and pour in lovingly, and really calling out what they see, like potential in me and what could be. And, would call out when I wasn't humble and prideful.
Which is not, those are not great conversations.
No.
Yeah. I had a friend and a kind of a mentor had that moment where just sat me down, and he actually brought up, and it was hard to hear because, man, the humility issue is always a huge issue for me. It's a constant struggle to for me. It's not thinking too lowly of myself. It's the other way, and both of those are not right, like you talked about, Ron. But I had a mentor, really sent me down. It was a very simple conversation, but really honest. And he actually pulled out a verse from the Bible. It pops up several times in the Bible. This same statement pops up. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And he just said, he's like, man, you are so gifted. You are so capable. He's like, but do you really want to be a person that God's working against? Like, God's resisting you. God's closing doors in front of you, shutting down opportunities just to try to get you to be humble. Like, you don't want to be that guy, and that stung. Of course, at first I was mad, and I was like, how dare he? Because I am humble. And then I was like, wait a second, that probably proves his point. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And for some reason, God seems like he's really interested in us becoming more and more humble, Ron. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know a person that doesn't wrestle with this whole either I think too lowly of myself or too highly, and like or every one of us wrestles with it. And God is like zeroes in on that for every person that I know, and what do you have any ideas like why, or in your own life, like why is that God's so focused on us having this view of ourselves that lines up with his view of us,
That's such a good question. It's incredibly hard. I think there's the real practical part just of like our trust in God and his word. And it's hard to take stuff at face value until it's like validated somehow by someone or something else. Or if you grew up in a family where it maybe for whatever reason, certain aspects of you weren't validated, then you start off in the hole and you go looking for an over validation, through people or things that maybe aren't really correctly assessing you either, but they make you feel better, and all of that makes it so hard, to figure out how to be humble. I don't know. I think a lot of it is just, if especially on the end of like, well, I think actually pride would be the opposite of humility. And actually, regardless if you're struggling on the low end, like, or the high end, because there's a weird pride to leaving yourself in the ditch or keep punishing yourself or keep speaking negative. There's something like, I am going to belittle myself. I don't know. I haven't thought through that much, but either way, like I have to tie it to the enemy. If pride was really the pivot point for Satan and massive tool of the devil, then the opposite of that being humility. No wonder he's gonna make me focused. Maybe that's a better opposite of humility, would just be real self-centered. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a self-absorption of a lowly nature or a self-absorption of like I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
And then there's the whole part of it where I think it's opposite of humility is just saying, this is who I am and I don't change. Mm-hmm. Whether it's like, hey, I'm awesome. Like, this is who I am. It's how I roll. Or, well, you know what? This is who I am. Nothing can change me. There's in a weird way, there's like this specialness about it, right? Like, mm-hmm. Oh, hey, nothing can fix me. Not even God. Not even, or I don't need anybody, and either both of those are like resisting God's grace in our life. Like we're both of those situations, I feel like, we turn down the grace that God offers and the love that God offers.
And I think there's like a worth, your self-worth tied to that a lot, which would explain why it's so hard, because I think we're super protective, consciously and subconsciously, of like our worth or our value. And as soon as that takes a hit, which for most of us is multiple times a day, right? Then our like almost incredible Hulk-like response, to just like kind of push back on that, even if it doesn't come out of your mouth or what, like, oh gosh, my value, my worth, being attacked. And my response then, humility sounds like the worst response to protect my value or my worth. It sounds like I'm just going to be open and vulnerable now for you to continue to attack my worth. So therefore, like, if it's happening multiple times a day and it sounds like the worst option, like in my flesh, then I think that's going to be pretty hard.
Oh yeah. And then you think, man, that makes so much sense. And then I do this too. We all do it. I think we stake our value, our worth, our identity on some totally meaningless thing. That's then we're like, we're going to defend this to the death. So it's like, I'm the guy with the biggest truck or the coolest guitar or the hottest wife, or the, you know, the biggest house, like or you name it, right? I can throw the ball farthest or lift the most, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff is just like, this is who I am, because it's like, this is all I have. Like this is what makes me me. I have to defend this turf. And behind that sinking feeling, like there's no one else coming for me, like to defend me. No one else has my back. I have to stand my ground here. And then we just get into this absolute me-centered existence. And it's just like, I don't know if you guys feel that. I feel that a lot. I find myself staking like a lot of emotional, like, effort and even value on just the dumbest stuff, you know, even in an argument, right? You know, it's like, well, Sarah and I having a disagreement, I was like, I'm not going to back down on, you know, what drawer the forks go in. You know, it's like, because that's, you know, it's like, what? You step back and you're like, what is this? What am I doing right now?
Yeah.
But in the moment, it's like, I can't give this up because this is me.
Yeah.
You know, this is my identity is wrapped around this thing or this idea or this group or this outcome that I want to see, you know?
Right.
Well, it's interesting at times too, because I think a lot of times it almost feels like there's just scenarios where like choosing to be humble in a moment or trying to step into something with humility and not leaning into like having to be or defend yourself for this thing, or even like to be able to be humble and receive what someone is saying, even if you don't agree with it or it hurts you or it's hard to hear. There's a lot of times it seems almost like to be humble is like a sign of weakness in moments. And I think it's like this auto defense within us of like, I'm not going to hear what you're saying, or I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go for that. And it's been one, actually, I think what's been one of the most humbling things is actually when I became the worship director and then had like people under me that I was overseeing, because it was this weird thing of like, oh, this is weird. Like, I don't view myself as like a leader and like got to talk about things and whatever. But I think the humbling moments have actually been when I've had my team members call stuff out within me. And it's this moment of like, okay, I'm going to choose to listen, to have open ears and heart and mind, and try to sift through what's actually value in there. Where's God trying to speak into them about things that I probably already know about, I've just been bearing and not dealing with? Because it's interesting. Humility is definitely, and being humble in those moments is harder to do. It's harder to not be quick to defend or try to justify that. But what I've found in choosing to be humble and receive it and try to sift through stuff, and then, you know, having the conversation and talking through stuff and things, is usually there's been more growth in myself personally, and then even the ability to now speak into something with the person. And this almost like, okay, they extended or they showed humility with what I had to say. Just wanted, wow, like maybe I can hear what they have to say and this stuff. And so for me, like, I think being in that role was very humbling, as I was like, oh, I don't know everything. I don't know, like, just because I have this title doesn't mean I know everything or I'm the expert or in the room. And but it can be this wrestling match on that end. And it's one I try, but I feel like I fail a lot at times. And especially like tying in, I think humility can get confusing in the sense of a right and wrong, or like you feel like this thing is wrong. And so it gets confusing on like, is this a moment to puff up and defend and go for it? Or is this a moment to be humble and be, so to speak? And that's what's so fascinating. I mean, even looking at the life of Jesus, like what moments did he kind of more ignite and step into like, no, this is not okay? And what were the other moments of just, I mean, people are throwing stuff at him and he's just humble. He's just calm. He just takes it, you know?
He wasn't like a doormat.
Yeah.
You know, and there's certainly times where he did get righteously angry.
Yeah.
And yet still in humility, you know, and then certain times you know, in particular at the cross, where he's just kind of letting it, you know, totally releasing his rights that he could have claimed and didn't.
Yeah, I mean, put yourself in Jesus' shoes, right? Where he was always right. You know, back to you, Jala. Like it's so hard it's hard to be humble when you're not sure what's right and wrong. But then when you're like, man, I know I'm right, and then you just are humble anyway. And that's Jesus' hallmark. If you had to pick one attitude, I mean, Paul did it, right? Ron, you hit it on Sunday, right? I mean, if you had to pick one attitude for Jesus that you would say sums him up, it would be that he's humble. He's always putting the needs of others in front of himself, you know. Even if you think about the time when he was angry, like in the temple, you know, it was all about for others. There was all of this religious confusion going on that was a barrier to people understanding who God was and having access to him, you know, and he was not having that. But it wasn't for him. When it came to defending himself, he was praying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. You know, that attitude I got goosebumps thinking about that. It's incredible.
I think that's the big part, because like we know personally, and so many in our church know, the beauty of what the humility of Jesus afforded them and afforded me and afforded you guys. Like, were it not for Jesus being so humble, like I wouldn't be able to have a relationship with him, you know? And then somehow my humbling myself kind of before him just facilitates even more of that relationship, you know? And I think that's so key, and I think that's where, like in Philippians 2, Paul was really going. We get the great example of humility from Jesus, and then we're called to imitate it, because it's really better for everybody. It's certainly better for our like relationships, like all of them. Like my marriage is better when I'm humble. My relationship with my kiddos, like my relationship with you guys, and I'm sorry, I'm so tired. Like the last couple of weeks have been so heavy, and like just the relationship with the church and our community and all of that. It's like, it's just so much better when there's that humility first. We could still disagree, but just come in humility, you know, with each other. And it's like, it does something really special.
Yeah. It's like you said, Ron, I jotted it down from our conversation earlier. You said humility can't help but lead to unity. And that's just it, man. I mean, that's it. Where the more we see each other like God sees us, no more, no less, we all find ourselves just synchronized, like beautifully, like we see our place and how we fit, and we feel accepted, and we don't have to defend ourselves. And all of that comes from seeing like, hey, I'm valuable and broken, just like God sees me, you know. I mean, I'm immensely loved, where you and I are all, Jala, I mean, all of us are just so deeply loved, we can't wrap our minds around it and our hearts around it. And at the same time, so deeply broken too, you know. I mean, and maybe that's the starting point for humility. I don't know, as we think about where to go from here, I guess, is just this idea of God's grace, and how we both desperately need it and completely deserve it in a weird way. Like God sees us so valuable that we're worth it. We're worth all the effort that he has put into extending grace to us. But then we also need it. Like I can't survive without it. So I'm valuable, but I'm broken. Mm-hmm. And that lets me see others in a way that they are also valuable and also deeply broken. Yeah. And that lets me put their needs ahead of my own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll get us into a lot of really special places. Humility will, you know, and it's going to take that for understanding in these hostile situations, in the middle of really legitimate injustice going on, and so much for me to learn and understand. And, you know, I don't even know, is it possible to learn and understand if you're not humble?
Yeah.
And I certainly can't listen well, like John said again, if I'm not humble. So yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing I think that's like just the most fascinating thing for all of us is like the most powerful like being, like who took the form of man, like gave up every aspect of perfection, of peace, and chose to walk onto lowest. I mean, even the fact that like Jesus wasn't born into like riches and power in an earthly manner, and in this way that was like this cute little Christmas manger scene. Like it was messy and not great, and that's the whole walk and the whole journey. And I mean, Jesus could have snapped his fingers and wiped everyone out if he wanted, but that's not the case. And yet, with all of these people that at one point were praising him, who've now turned their back, it's like what you're saying. The posture is like, Father, forgive them, for they know. And what I think is really interesting is it actually demonstrates more strength to be humble than it is to be proud. Like, it's not hard to be prideful. It's not hard to think you're great and your stuff doesn't stink and you're good. Like, what's hard is to swallow your pride and to lay down what you want, or maybe what you think are right, or even in moments where you have been wronged or hurt, to be able to lay that down and to take more of the posture what Jesus has. And I think in this whole season for me is I just want to love people. I just want to point people to Jesus. Like, everything that comes out of my mouth and that I'm a part of, I want it to be humble, and I want it to point people to Jesus. And because that's the only source to deal with, to pride and the lack of humility, and people who maybe, masquerade around like they are humble, but they're not. And there's an agenda. And I know what knowing Jesus and really actually knowing him and watching his life and how it's impacted the followers who claim to know Jesus, even watching their journey. Like, you've got Peter is one of the most prideful, arrogant people, and we got kind of a front row seat to so many of these moments with him that are not great. But then seeing the end of like a big part of why this Christian movement exists is because he kept becoming more humble and like Jesus, and he walked with him and still fumbled. And so I think on our end, there's an ability to be gracious, like to not get trapped in the enemy's lies of like, you've dropped the ball, you're not good enough, you're not this. And there's just an ability to tune that out. Like, God's spirit is within us and it's transforming us, and the whole point of this life is to move more to being glory, like to bear the image of glory like God and like his son Jesus. And I'm learning more of like experiencing life to the full, like has a lot to do with being humble. It's not like Christianity unlocks this key to being rich and famous and everything's perfect and good. It's more of just in the hardest and crappiest of times being able to be humble and surrender to that and still see like God's goodness all around. So,
Yeah.
and I by no means have unlocked it or figured out. You could ask my wife, they must need therapy after COVID and everything else. We're good. Everything's good. But I'm just saying. So
Yeah, that's an awesome place to land our discussion there, Jala. Thinking about the God that we love and serve is known. He's a God that gives himself away, gives his son, the generosity that comes from a heart of humility. And we want to show what Jesus is like, what God is like. Being humble is the way to do it. I was thinking we could wrap this up. No better way than Paul in Ephesians 2. Ron, you hit this in your message this week. It says, make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take interest in others too. Bottom line, you must have the same attitude Christ Jesus had. Guys, great discussion. This could go on for a lot longer. Always feels like it's too short. Yeah. And thanks to everybody else joining us too, wherever you are, at home and on the road. You've been able to join in with us. Hope there's been something here for you that you can take away, as well as we talk about this humility, seeing ourselves like God sees us, in so much need of grace and so deserving of grace because of the value we have as those who've been created by God. Amazing. Hey, don't forget, join us Friday, 10 o'clock. We've got morning coffee. And then, of course, we'll see you Sunday services online, 10:30 and 6 at night. I'll see you there in the chat. We'll all be there, and look forward to seeing you there. Much love to you as always. Stay connected with us, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channel, subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest from us. And no, we want to have conversations with you. We love you. We want to know what you think. We want to know what's going on with your life. So reach out to us, email, social media, anywhere you find us. We're there to be with you and talk with you. Much love to you. We'll see you Friday morning coffee, Sunday for services. Have a great night.